name is Amy O'Neill, and I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Relations here at Alpha Sigma Nu. The last time we sent a survey to our members, it was very clear that there was interest in programming for those approaching or in retirement. And so we are so pleased today to offer this presentation, and we thank our guest speakers for their time and expertise. I want to introduce them, and we also have our Executive Director, Kate Gartner, joining us today. And I will introduce them in a moment, but I want to just go over two housekeeping items. One is that our presentation will be approximately 40 to 45 minutes long. We will leave 15 minutes for questions, and at any time, you can use the chat or Q&A feature and submit your question, and I will try to get to all of them at the conclusion of their talk. So let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. First, we have Tom Auffenberg. He retired in 2016 after careers in teaching, law, financial planning, and 25 years as a business owner. His education includes a BA in philosophy from Santa Clara University, a law degree from St. Louis University, a certified financial planner designation, MA in theology, and a certificate in spiritual direction from Aquinas Institute, training to companion people making the spiritual exercises, also participated in a program focusing on transitioning from the work years to the retirement years at the Halftime Institute, and afterward became a certified halftime coach. In addition to all this, he serves on several nonprofit boards in the St. Louis community, and he's currently the regional coordinator for Contemplative Leaders in Action in St. Louis, and the program director for the Next Chapter program offered through SLU. John W. Green is the Vice President for Partnership Engagement and Director of the Philadelphia, South Jersey for the Ignatian Volunteer Corps. He is heading up the Curry Alumni Partners for Service Initiative, which is named after Charlie Curry of the Society of Jesus, focusing on partnerships with educational institutions and their alumni interested in service throughout IVC. He's also expanding service opportunities throughout the Philadelphia and South Jersey area. He was a Jesuit volunteer himself in Portland, Maine in the 94-95 year and graduated with an MSW from Boston College. So I would like to start today by asking you both to talk a little bit about discernment. The Father General of the Society of Jesus, Father Sosa, explains discernment as a gift of Ignatian spirituality. It's preparing to go beyond what appears and to be open to the signs of the Spirit in life. That discernment is to find God's will. Can you both share why discernment's especially helpful for those approaching retirement? Tom, I thought maybe you could go first.
Sure. Thank you, Amy, for that introduction, and hello to all of you I cannot see, but I know you're there. It's gratifying to see so many on this call. When Amy told me she wanted to start this session by having John and me speak to this question, I thought that was a great way to start today. And it's actually a question that I love to answer. I would probably rephrase it just a bit, and not just, and I think this is what Amy means, is not so much why is discernment especially helpful, but why is Ignatian discernment especially helpful for those approaching retirement? And my answer is a bit lengthy, but I hope it's easy to follow. I think the other night I didn't take up all my time, so I think I was pretty careful I won't exceed my time today. But before I attempt my answer, I want to offer just a little bit of background. I know probably many of you are well versed in Ignatian, or some are well versed in Ignatian spirituality, maybe all, but I want to distinguish what I see as discernment from Ignatian discernment. In discernment, it's a very popular word these days, but I view discernment as thoughtful, thorough, careful decision-making, not just casual decision-making. I see Ignatian discernment is prayerful decision-making. So what does that mean? I see Ignatian discernment as having all the characteristics of discernment, but it really goes a step further. The person doing Ignatian discernment pauses after, say, identifying possible choices and attempts to determine which choice God desires for him or her to make. The Ignatian discerner attempts to hear God's voice on the matter. The Ignatian discerner wants to feel like he or she is partnering with God on whatever choice is being made. And I won't go into all the nuances of Ignatian decision-making, although that would happen in this next chapter program. But I'll just say that the approach of Ignatian discernment that Ignatius outlines and many writers have further developed is it does somewhat make a difference depending on the difficulty of the decision and the magnitude of the decision. Quickly, you'd say sometimes the right decision is just obvious. Very rare that's the case. Sometimes the right decision becomes clear somewhat soon. Less rare, but still rare. And sometimes the right decision involves a lengthier process. So it's prayerful decision making, as I said. And so one question that often comes up is, how does the Ignatian discerner develop this ability to hear God's voice? Also known as, how do they develop their spiritual intuition? And my quick answer to that would be, I think daily prayer is a huge aid, especially Ignatian forms of prayer, such as the examen. So now to get to the question. When answering the question, I'm going to make two assumptions. One, I'm going to assume that a person desires to be as fulfilled and happy as possible during his or her retirement years. That's something that they'd like to see. And I'm also going to assume that a person is most happy and fulfilled when who he or she is or what he or she does with his or her time is in sync with what God desires for him or her in those areas. So the transition to retirement is one of the most challenging, complex transition most people face in their lives. And I don't know about you, but I didn't learn about Ignatian discernment or Ignatian spirituality until I was about 40. And that, even though I attended a Jesuit university and a Jesuit law school, it just really wasn't available in the 70s. And many of my most important life decisions, such as what did I major in, what was my initial career path, who did I marry, whether I was going to have children, what city was I going to live in, all those were pretty much made without the benefit of Ignatian discernment. I didn't know anything about it at the time I was making all those decisions. So why was Ignatian discernment important for me as I started charting my post-retirement chapter? Because it was kind of going to be like the first chapter that had been really fully informed by Ignatian discernment. I wanted to feel I was giving myself the best opportunity to lead a fulfilling, happy next chapter. And unlike with my other transitions, I wanted to try to intentionally partner with God to determine what it should look like. It just wasn't going to be me deciding. It just wasn't going to be me and my wife deciding. It just wasn't going to be me and someone else deciding, but God was going to be on the team as well. And in a nutshell, that's why I feel this prayerful decision-making with God as a partner, it's been key to my next chapter, and I think it's a very important thing to take into account for anybody. And that's my answer to the question. I'll turn it over to John.
Can I just say ditto? Is that okay? No, thank you, Tom. That was helpful, and it's helped me to think through a little bit about how I want to answer this question. And one of the things that the Father General talked about is that the spiritual exercises are really a process of searching and finding. And he talks a little bit about discernment being the more of the process of finding, and specifically finding God's voice and God's guidance in your decision-making process. And so I've thought about this a little bit as it pertains to approaching retirement or being in retirement. And one example that comes up for me, which I think is fairly relevant, my background coming into this work is as a licensed clinical social worker. And as you said, Amy, I got my social work degree at Boston College. But my process to to getting to that point in my life where I decided to get my social work degree was one that kind of went around rather than in a direct line. And through high school and college, the guidance that I got from the adults in my life was when I described what I wanted to do, they explained to me that I was going to take psychology as coursework. And I followed through with that. And in college, some of the other courses that I could take were in social work, and they really spoke to me. But I didn't really have the guidance around what the difference was. And I just stayed kind of laser focused on that path until I joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And I started to develop that side of myself, which I think is the discerning side that we learn about in Ignatian spirituality. But I think when you remove the religious aspect from it, some people talk about it, paying attention to your gut. They talk about instinct. They talk about these other things. And so the way that I think of it now in my life, but also in going through the discernment process with folks who come into IVC, is that I believe that God wants us to work hard and establish a plan and think through and set goals. But the discernment part and the finding part that the Father General talks about is where we show up and we do that work, but we leave space to be veered in a different direction, and to pay attention to all of the things that we bring and the way that we think those things are going to come together to work, but also have the space and the perspective and the patience to step back from that and allow God and the Holy Spirit to enter in and to say, maybe this is where you thought you were going to be, but I'm going to send you over here a little bit, and you'll know why when you get there.
Great answers, both of you. Thank you. I think that's a great way to start the rest of our discussion today. So we had planned for Tom to speak first for a little bit, and then John next. So go ahead, Tom. You can take it over.
Okay. Well, hello again, everyone. My goal for this part of the program is just to give you a taste of a program called The Next Chapter, whose goal is to assist people to transition to a fulfilling life after they retire from paid work. But I must say, in some cases, the result is people don't retire. They realize that maybe that they feel they're being called to make their greatest contribution from their existing platform, but maybe operate a little differently on that platform. And I could go into numerous examples, but so it isn't necessarily the case that everybody that enters the Next Chapter program in the end decides to retire. Most do, but some decide to stay put. So in a nutshell, the program is a spiritual approach, as I've said earlier, in preparing for retirement. And more specifically, it really draws upon Ignatian spirituality more than any other. The inspiration of the program, I'll tell you a little bit about its history. I attended a program many years ago whose purpose was to assist people to transition to their next chapters. And during that program is when I decided I wanted to offering a program like it part of my next chapter. But I also knew that I wanted it to be different than the program I had participated in. And I think that was because I've been kind of a long-term lover of Ignatian spirituality, spent a lot of time with it, and I could really see a place for Ignatian spirituality in a next chapter type program. And that was not the case in the program I was involved in. So I knew I wanted to incorporate it as Ignatian spirituality, especially Ignatian discernment. And so I went about developing it, consulting with various people, and started offering the program 3 years ago at St. Louis U. And I'm grateful to say it has been very well received. It's attracted a full crowd of 36 people all 3 years it's been in existence. And it's been, I think rated very highly by those who have participated. So who is it designed for? Primarily, it's designed for people approaching retirement. That's not to say that we don't occasionally get some recently retired people in the case. That's not to say we don't get occasionally somebody who's making a transition, maybe an empty nest transition as opposed to a retirement transition. But by and large, it's people approaching retirement. So what does the program look like? It's 6 sessions, 1 session per month. These sessions, if we do a program through Alpha Sigma Nu, will be virtual, likely using Zoom. It also includes between sessions 4 and 5 a virtual retreat that starts on a Friday evening and concludes late Saturday afternoon. We also, I don't know how this would exactly work, but in St. Louis, we've put together a panel of people that present in a special session, and they're focusing on local, national, and international volunteer opportunities for those people that are looking to gain knowledge on various possibilities for volunteering. The sessions, the 6 monthly sessions, last approximately 4 hours. I know that sounds long, especially for Zoom. It doesn't prove to be long in person, but for Zoom. But there are breaks, and I would make every attempt to avoid Zoom burnout. The program is a mix of some lecture, guest speaker to small group discussions, and we'd use the Zoom breakout rooms for that, and large group discussions. And I should tell you that there's approximately 5 to 7 hours of work, prep work for each of these sessions, mainly reading and various things. So that's kind of the logistics of the program. The key building blocks of the program I thought I had addressed are, I could make it more than 4, but the 4 key building blocks is one thing I mentioned in my earlier talk is we really encourage people to engage in daily prayer. Some are already in that practice, some aren't, but it's key to developing this ability to be a good discerner, and especially the Ignatian examen. Discernment it's a learned art, and daily prayer is one of the things that really helps you develop a comfort level with it. Increased self-knowledge is another one of the core components. Sometimes it's helping people identify their human talents. Sometimes it's helping them identify their spiritual gifts. The program utilizes a variety of tools to accomplish increased self-knowledge. And I will say some people benefit a lot more from one than the other, but because all have benefited from each of them, we have a pretty good cross section of things to help people get a better understanding of what their talents might be or gifts might be that they might utilize in that next chapter. There's a real focus on a thorough understanding of discernment and getting a comfort level with practicing it, not just reading about it, not just hearing about it, but getting a comfortable level with doing it. And finally, and a really important component is a real practical component, and that is we want everybody to kind of graduate, so to speak, with a written next chapter plan. It's always subject to, updating, but the program is intentionally called the next chapter and not the last chapter. And it's likely most of you will have several more chapters in your life in addition to this post-retirement chapter. And I would like to think that the process you learn from making transitions in this program will serve you well in any future transitions. So if you want to learn more, I think Amy will put this in the chat box or send you an email, but you can learn more about the Next Chapter program and read several articles that have been written about it by St. Louis Press on our website called nextchapterprogram.org. Next steps, my understanding is if there's sufficient interest from these 2 meetings that we've had, if you indicate that by emailing Amy, then I'll schedule what I call information sessions, which will cover some of what I've covered today, but it'll cover the program more in depth, and it'll give you a chance to ask any questions you have, and probably also a chance to get a feel for the kind of people you'll be journeying with, because we'll have everybody that's thinking of doing it in 1 or 2 or 3 information sessions, depending on how many there are. I'm not sure what a likely start is. I think I said something different the other night as I've thought about it. I think a likely start might be January and running the program January to June. It could start in November. That might be pushing a little bit. Amy will let you know on that. We got to talk about that. So before I turn it over to John, I want to offer just a little bit of context for how John's program, the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, and Next Chapter work together in St. Louis. We do have a chapter of Ignatian Volunteer Corps in St. Louis. I'll just say real quickly, I see Next Chapter as kind of preliminary to the Ignatian Volunteer Corps. We attract people still working by and large, and they're starting to prepare for their retirement with, as I said, some being recently retired. And since many, but not all, are looking to do some volunteer work in their next chapters, as I told you, after the 4th session, we have a special session that exposes them to opportunities. And one of the programs we always expose them to is the Ignatian Volunteer Corps in St. Louis. It tends to be a very good fit for some, and we've had several people become Ignatian volunteers out of the next chapter. So thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have after John's presentation.
Thanks, Tom. As introduced, I'm John Green, and I work for IVC. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about IVC as a program and an organization, and then describe what our program contains. And then I can tell you a little bit about the roles that I play with the organization, which Amy talked about when she first introduced me. So, but just to start, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm excited to be a part of this. So the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, or IVC, is a faith-based national nonprofit organization. And it was started in 1995 by 2 Jesuit priests, Father Jim Conroy and Father Charlie Costello. And these 2 got together because they had a dream of being able to put or match the dynamic abilities of men and women who are 50 years or more with the needs of the poor and the vulnerable and marginalized people through service with partnering nonprofit organizations, schools, or churches. IVC is a Catholic organization, and we're rooted in Ignatian spirituality, but we do invite people of other faith traditions to apply and share in the unique program of faith and service. And we do get that from time to time, where people are interested in being a part of the program and serving, but not necessarily rooted in Catholicism or Ignatian spirituality. We sustain the members of our program through monthly support meetings. We occasionally do retreats, and there's opportunities for folks participating to do one-on-one reflection in the Ignatian tradition. So we've been around for 25 years. And currently we operate in 25 US cities, and we have over 650 Service Corps members working in over 325 organizations. The 650 Service Corps member number might be a little bit on the high end at this point with the pandemic and trying to figure out what our service year is going to look like as we move forward. And when we talk about 25 US cities, there is, I think we have a total of 22 regions. But there's a number of regions like the one that I'm in. I cover the Philadelphia area, but I also cover South Jersey and can even take people from Delaware. So that's where the 25 US cities piece comes in. And we added 3 new cities last year. There was New Orleans in Louisiana, Albany in New York, and then in Portland, Maine. And we expect to add more and continue to grow as our organization continues to grow. The heart of our IVC program is a reflection process that's both spiritual and it's analytical. And it guides our Service Corps members in the ongoing search for the presence of the living God. Our members receive spiritual direction under the guidance of a trained spiritual reflector, and they participate in monthly group reflection meetings and attend 3 retreats or days of reflection during the IVC year. Some communities are able to go on overnight retreats and do them for the weekend. And for some of the smaller communities, those retreat days might just be a day where they head off together and do some reflection. This process prepares and strengthens the volunteers for the reality of working on a long-term basis in challenged communities and settings. There's a couple of distinguishing characteristics. Tom started to talk about this a little bit, but one thing that is unique about IVC's program is that there's a significant commitment for the Service Corps members. And typically they serve for a 10-month period from September to June for either 1 or 2 days a week in their organization, church, or school. So in a sense, they become like a part-time staff person with these organizations. And there's some flexibility around sometimes when people start or if they work during the summer and how the hours are added up, but that's generally how it works. The second piece is that IVC they work hard to match folks who have certain career paths or life experiences to make a valuable contribution in their existing organization, church, or school. They want to match those skills so that people can feel like they're using the skills that they've developed. And then the third thing is the spiritual reflection program that the Service Corps, that the IVC provides to the Service Corps members. This spiritual reflection process of discerning where God is present or how to find meaning in your service. That's how we define the spiritual reflection process. The elements of IVC's spiritual support program are personal reflection, one-on-one reflection with a spiritual reflector, and then the monthly meetings with other Service Corps members. A lot of times this will involve a book discussion. This year we're using Joan Chittister's book, The Time Is Now. And oftentimes people do some journaling and some different things on their own. And then there's also the retreats and the days of reflection during the year. Through the program, IVC Service Corps members enter a community of support that sustains their service and encourages personal reflection on where God is calling them through their work in IVC and beyond. These Service Corps members come to us sometimes after raising families or careers in business or law, finance, medicine, education, government. They bring all sorts of skills and life experience to the organizations that the organizations can leverage. For example, someone who had a career in accounting could work with an organization that's serving individuals who are experiencing homelessness and help them with their bookkeeping or their financial system. Or somebody with a real estate background might be a good fit for Habitat for Humanity that is constantly trying to locate properties and acquire places that they can renovate. So these are just some of the ways that we try and work with people and match their skills with the need in the community. We welcome people who are 50 years or better. And as I said, there's usually a 1 or 2 day a week commitment to serve for that 10-month period. People that are self-motivated and financially stable, open and flexible, and that they're suited for new and unexpected situations where they're serving. People that are drawn to serving folks who are materially poor and willing to participate in the spiritual reflection program. So that just kind of gives an overview of how it works in the regions. There is some differences here and there depending on where they're located and how big they are, but that's generally how it works. My role with IVC is I am the director for Philadelphia and South Jersey, and so I'm charged with the task of maintaining our spiritual program with our current folks that are serving in IVC, but also to try and identify new organizations, churches, schools that might benefit from IVC folks to have them serve, and also try and identify individuals who are living in this area that would be interested in serving. Tom talked about the next chapter, working with folks that are preparing for retirement. more often than not, we get people who have already retired. But in some cases, there are, whether someone owns their own business or they've started to scale back in their hours, they may step forward and approach IVC because they've gone down from full-time to 2 or 3 days a week, and they're looking to try and get involved in something now so that when they do eventually retire, they're already there. It just depends on what someone's situation is. And just as a side note, usually when we place someone in an organization, the amount of time that they usually stay there is anywhere from 5 to 7 years. I mean, people tend to really fall in love with their placements and want to stay there for an extended period, which says a lot about the work that we're doing. The discernment process that we talked about at the beginning, there was a couple of examples that I wanted to share in my own experience as the Philadelphia, South Jersey director. There's a woman who I worked with earlier this year whose name is Joan, and she's a retired teacher, a music teacher to be specific. And she came forward and said that she wanted to do some teaching, and she was kind of open to the process, but was uncertain about what was available. And after we talked, I brought her into a local Augustinian service organization that was providing ESL classes for local folks. And initially she was nervous about this. She didn't know how her music teaching skills were going to transfer over to ESL, but she has found a groove and is off and running with that. And even was able to take her program in person at the organization and transfer it online, where she's continuing to work with folks today. And is just raving about the experience. There's another woman who I connected with recently, and she's still discerning her process, but she has a background in finance and owns her own financial business. And at first she had said, I don't think I want to do anything that has to do with my professional career. I think I want to do something different. I'm still working. I haven't fully retired, and I don't know that I want to do that in my outside of work time. But in our process of working together and discerning where she's feeling called, she's starting to come around to feeling as though maybe that is where the Spirit is calling her, and that she's feeling more and more like her natural gifts and her professional skills may be what she wants to utilize rather than doing something different. And she's still in the process around that. But it's been exciting to work with her and to partner with her in that process of figuring it out. So the other role that I have with IVC is that my title is Vice President of Partnership Engagement. But essentially, there's an initiative that we started through IVC that we're calling the Curry Alumni Partners for Service. And Father Charlie Curry, who he passed away in January of 2019, but he was on our board for a number of years. And after having been the president of a couple of universities and being with the AJCU, he really, really drove home the need for IVC to partner with alumni offices of the Jesuit colleges and universities. And the fit is natural when I describe it, but essentially, like, these our foundations in Ignatian spirituality and wanting to be women and men for others starts with our education, and it starts. The foundation is formed when we're in school, and then we take that into our careers, we bring it into our families, and we serve throughout our lives. And retirement is this time when we suddenly have an openness and a flexibility to apply our skills in a different way. And when we have stayed rooted in Ignatian spirituality, it's just a natural fit to want to serve and work on the behalf of others. And so the CAPS program is one where I work with the universities and colleges to get our message out to alumni and to remind them that seed was planted early. And I'll steal this line from my Jesuit volunteer time. They talk about once you go through the Jesuit Volunteer Corps that you are ruined for life, and that your eyes are open to your purpose and the way that you can serve in the world. And I believe that that's true when you go through, when you're Jesuit educated. And so when you're nearing retirement or in retirement, and you have been ruined in this way, it just makes sense to want to come forward and serve. And so it's been exciting to be a part of that process as well. And it's helped me in the Philadelphia, South Jersey region, but it's also allowed me to get to know our other regions and where these schools are, because I'm the contact person for that. And if someone is somewhere out there in the United States and they want to figure out a way to get connected and serve, then I am the point person for that. And I will work with you and shepherd you through that process. So thank you. And I'm available for questions and all of that. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. What a wealth of information and expertise. So now is the chance, if you have a question, I would be happy to answer our presenters here. You can write it in the question and answer box or the chat box, and I will make sure to get to it. There aren't any in the queue right now. I have one for you, John. How can an Alpha Sigma Nu member get involved with IBC?
Well, so, I mean, I will say that we are partnered together. And so whether they reach out to you or they reach out to us, that's a first step. And they know how to contact you. We have a website that will bring you to our national website. And on there, there are links to the CAPS program. There's also links to Philadelphia and South Jersey. And either way, you wind up in contact with me. And what I would do is I would probably set up either a phone call or a Zoom call, since we're all getting better and better with this language medium, just to start to talk about it and to introduce the program and start to talk about what an individual is thinking they want to do. Because that is, because I think that oftentimes people come, going back to the Father General's discernment piece, they come in search. They are searching, they have some ideas, there's some goals, but it's in that process of discernment, in talking through it, in being able to broaden the scope a little bit and thinking outside the box, that the direction starts to flow. And so, I mean, I'm available by email, phone call, and I'd love to talk to anybody that's thinking about it.
Great. This one's going to be, I think, directed more towards you, Tom. Is there any individual direction in the Next Chapter program to help one find their purpose in this transitional stage of life?
Well, one thing I didn't mention, I didn't cover all aspects of the program, but one of the things we do in St. Louis is encourage people through the program. It's optional, it's their choice, to work with a spiritual director. And for a lot of them, that's a brand new territory. For some, they're familiar with that. And because of my network of connections in St. Louis, it's fairly easy for me to give them a long list of spiritual directors with biographies that can serve as spiritual directors. How exactly it might work in a virtual program remains to be seen. But I guess I would also say, in answer to that question, that is kind of the point of the program, to help people kind of arrive at that purpose through this process. I mean, it's a personal journey. Nobody can tell you what that purpose is. That's something you've got to arrive at on your own. And I guess it reminds me of another thing I failed to mention as clearly as I could have, and that is, I really feel like the learning process is definitely facilitated by the facilitators of the program, but almost equally so by the fellow participants. There's a lot that's learned in that process from one another. So I would say the overall goal is to help you land on that purpose, but in terms of one-on-one sessions to land on that purpose, occasionally somebody will reach out and want to talk more in depth with one of the facilitators, and that happens, but it isn't actually a structured part of the program, other than we really encourage the spiritual direction, in the program. hopefully that.
Great. In our last presentation a couple days ago, one member asked if he should take a year off after retirement before getting into a program and service and volunteering. And I wonder if the both of you or one of you could share what you think about that.
So it's funny, I'll jump in real quick because the key word that I heard you say, Amy, is should. And that's always coming from a background in social work and having worked as a therapist for many years, whenever I hear the word should, I'm like, But I think it depends. It really depends on where someone is at and what they're needing. And I think that for some folks, they are energized and busy and active in a way where they want to keep moving, they want to stay engaged, they want to know what their next thing is before they're finished the thing they're doing now. And in that way, that may very well be God speaking to that person to keep plowing through and keeping their energy up and keep moving and move on to the next thing. For some people, that process can be pretty noisy. It can be distracting. It can be overwhelming, and it could create a pattern of making quick decisions that wind up not being the ones that were right for them at the time. And so in that case, someone should. It's good to take a breather. It's good to take a step back and to feel that momentum and that direction, but also to take a minute with it and really make sure that they are in touch with what God is asking of them. So depends.
Yeah, what I would say on that, and I agree with what John said, is it varies. If you were somebody like me, you had been planning for your next chapter for a long time. So I didn't really feel a need to take time off. I was anxious to get to what I saw as my new work and my next chapter. Had I not done all that preliminary work and I was starting somewhat from scratch at retirement, which some that come to our program are, they've been so busy in their medical career, their engineering career, their account career, or whatever it is, that they haven't really had time to come up for air. I think the advice is more applicable there. I always caution people to, avoid a knee-jerk reaction because of a fear of boredom. And I see that happening. People make a mistake that way. They got all this time, they want to fill it up. Here's an offer. And the problem you run into with that is none of us want to be quitters. And we might realize early on, this isn't a very good fit for my talents or what they're wanting, but we stick with it. And maybe we stick with it for a year or two before we just finally say this isn't a good fit. Well, I view that as kind of wasted time, not totally wasted, but wasted time in getting to where you're really supposed to be. So I would say that I encourage people to take the time and realize that not every volunteer opportunity is like another, and some are going to fit you well and some aren't. And I would also encourage people, as long as we're on this theme, to always go kick the tires before you commit. I mean, this is a volunteer opportunity. You don't have, and you have some time, but go visit the organization, get to the feel of the environment, the culture, and what they're looking for, and get a comfort level that it's a fit with who you are and what you want to do, and then commit, but don't commit in advance.
Great answers, both of you. Thank you. One of our viewers has kind of a couple of questions in one. So John is asking, how do you actually figure out what God wants you to do? Does it vary on your actual status in life? 75 years old, still working, not working? Those are his questions.
That's the $64,000 question there. I don't think there's any real shortcut. I think it's a process of being very prayerful and staying open and try, God speaks to us through our desires, touch with whether this what your strong desires and make thinking about making a commitment to bring you joy, just the thought of it or the experience of it. But at least it's never happened to me that God's spoken from up on high. So I have to hear God's voice through prayer and through my emotions and through whether I think it's consistent with my deepest desires. John, you may have a different spin on that. I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, the longer I'm a part of this work, the more I realize that age is just a number. And I am in a unique situation where I've brought on some really great dynamic folks since I started, most of them in their early 60s. But some of the people that have been in the group for a long time that I've gotten to know are in their late 70s and early 80s. And every once in a while they tease that the former group is the young ones but I think that to answer the question of how do you know what God wants, I think that there is a framework or a scaffolding, if you will, that God wants us to show up. God wants us to serve and to participate in the wellness and happiness of others, and to find our own in that process. And I think the particulars lie somewhere in between, depending on how you pay attention. And I could get in trouble for that. I do not think that there's like a very specific predetermined plan for every person. I think that if you pay attention and you stay prayerful and you stay in touch with and aligned with God, you wind up where you belong. And that's where God wants you. And I think that we are, there's a person that I followed through some hospice forums, a doctor by the name of B.J. Miller, and he will often say that you are alive until you're not. And so as long as we are here and we have something that we can participate, then we should participate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the last question I have here is pertaining to the Next Chapter program. And I think it's a great way, unless there are other questions, to kind of end this. The question is the Next Chapter program open to anyone in the country or for anyone just in the St. Louis area? And I think typically, Tom, it's been for those who live in the St. Louis area, but we may have the opportunity here, if you're interested, just contact me at amy.o'neill@marquette.edu, and we would like to offer a virtual Next Chapter program for our members. So
that's how I see it. I think that's the beauty of one of the blessings of COVID maybe is we're considering doing things that we never considered before, and people are getting more and more comfortable with even though they may be getting tired of them, comfortable with online meetings. And so I see it as exciting, the idea of being able to offer it nationwide to wherever a member of Alpha Sigma Nu is. So that's the plan, as I understand it.
Amy, this is Kate. I think my question would be sort of connected to what you were just saying, Tom, the great opportunity for the virtual connection with the Next Chapter for people, particularly, we have a lot of members who maybe don't live in big cities.
Right.
And so I think that this is a great opportunity, but my question would be, do you have any other particularly Ignatian resources for people to look up online so that they can maybe do some preparation work or prayer or reading in advance of either participating in the next chapter or just if they're not in a place where they can access an IVC, for example, are there good websites to discover?
Well, a couple resources. I thought the first part of your question, and I get this from people at information sessions, is I'm new to Ignatian spirituality. I feel a little intimidated by my newness to it, and I try to tell them that this isn't a deep dive into Ignatian spirituality. It's a dive, but it's not the deep dive like making the exercises. But two books I tell them that will bring them up to speed in a hurry, I think, are What is Ignatian Spirituality by David Fleming. It's a short book, but I think it's very well written. And then a longer book that covers a lot more bases is Everything I Always Wanted to Know. I think that's the name of it, but it's by James Martin. The name, I don't know why it's escaping me right now, but it's
The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
By James Martin. There's some other books. That's it. But I would say if somebody wants to get up to speed on Ignatian spirituality a bit before the program starts, those would be two recommendations I've had. I don't really know how to access Ignatian spirituality programming online from a distant place. Like I don't know how somebody in the middle of Ohio would access John's IVC work in Philadelphia. But maybe you get creative on that and let people serve wherever they are and be part of that chapter. I don't know.
Well, and so I'll jump in there because that's something that we're now doing. And so one thing to answer your question, Kate, would be to have folks go to the IVC website and get in touch with me. I put my email address up there. We have had an influx of opportunities through some of the major organizations that have said we could use IVC Service Corps members, and we would love to have them. We would love to partner with you in this. And because we've moved a lot of our forums to Zoom format, we can establish monthly meetings, monthly spirituality meetings with folks and bring them together from anywhere in the country that are serving and doing these things online. And so it's been pretty amazing. There's some opportunities for teaching through the Jesuits. We've talked to Catholic Charities. We've talked to a number of different national partners that want us to come on board. And just to jump in on Tom's references, we are reimagining the Ignatian Examen by Mark Thibodeau. And then we're also doing Praying with Ignatius of Loyola by Jacqueline Bergen and Marie Schwann.
Nice.
Those are great resources in addition to what Tom mentioned. So
thanks to you both.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your presentation that I'm sure is very helpful to those of us who are approaching retirement or in retirement years. And again, if there's anyone who had follow-up questions, you can feel free to email me. If you think you might be interested in joining a virtual Next Chapter program, please email me. And we're just very grateful to you both for your time and expertise. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And this concludes our webinar. We're glad you could join us.
Okay, thank you much.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good
Have a
day.
nice day.
All right.